You could feel the anger tonight at a Board of Trustees meeting in Thornton Township. The board and citizens looking for accountability to their finances.
Rumors have been swirling that Tiffany Henyard, the self-proclaimed super mayor of Dalton, Illinois, has been detained and is now the subject of a federal investigation. This development signals the possible collapse of her administration, which has been clouded by years of controversy and corruption. Once seen as a leader who promised positive change for her community, Henyard's tenure has instead been marred by allegations of misconduct, financial mismanagement, and abuse of power, leading to overwhelming opposition from both former allies and residents. The unraveling of her administration did not happen overnight, but rather unfolded gradually, fueled by a series of scandals that exposed significant flaws in her leadership. Initially, Henyard presented herself as a transformative figure, vowing to uplift Dalton and implement policies aimed at benefiting its residents. However, red flags soon emerged, including accusations of excessive spending, retaliatory actions against employees and political rivals, and questionable financial dealings. Critics pointed to her extravagant use of taxpayer dollars, tens of thousands spent on luxury travel and personal expenses, while the town struggled economically. Concerns intensified when reports surfaced that she had awarded lucrative contracts to businesses with personal ties to her administration, further raising suspicions of corruption. As scrutiny mounted, Henyard responded with defiance, dismissing accusations as politically motivated attacks or conspiracies designed to undermine her leadership. Her governance style became increasingly autocratic, with reports of her silencing dissenting voices, removing employees who refused to align with her directives, and allegedly using intimidation tactics against those who questioned her decisions. The turning point came when multiple lawsuits were filed by former employees citing wrongful termination and retaliation, further exposing an administration driven by fear and manipulation rather than ethical leadership. Additionally, business owners in the community spoke out, claiming that Henyard's government had unfairly revoked business licenses and engaged in practices that stifled economic growth. One of the most damaging revelations came when reports surfaced of a federal investigation into her misappropriation of funds. If proven true, these allegations could lead to serious legal consequences, deepening the crisis. As the scandals gained momentum, even her former allies began to distance themselves, acknowledging that her leadership was no longer sustainable. The most significant betrayals came from within her own political circle, former defenders who could no longer ignore the mounting evidence of corruption and misconduct. Public sentiment in Dalton shifted dramatically, with residents expressing frustration and anger over the state of their town. Community meetings turned into battlegrounds where citizens demanded accountability for the financial and ethical controversies plaguing her administration. In response, Henyard attempted to maintain control, portraying herself as a victim of unfair targeting due to her unique and unconventional leadership style. However, this narrative failed to gain traction as investigations progressed and more damning details emerged. With law enforcement and federal authorities now involved, Henyard's grip on power appears to be slipping. Once confident and dominant in her handling of Dalton's affairs, she now finds herself backed into a corner, facing potential legal consequences that could signal the end of her political career. As the investigation unfolds and the community watches closely, one question remains. How did a leader who once promised transformation become the embodiment of scandal and corruption for Dalton's residents? The answer lies in the painful truth of her leadership's steady decline. The realization that promises of progress mean little when leadership is driven by self-interest has become painfully clear. True change requires integrity, accountability, and a commitment to serving the people, not personal gain. Whether Tiffany Henyard's political downfall is sealed by legal action or she simply fades into infamy, one thing is certain: her once loyal supporters have turned their backs, and her legacy will now be defined by controversy, corruption, and shattered trust. Tiffany Henyard's tenure as mayor of Dalton, Illinois, has been nothing short of controversial, characterized by a volatile mix of corruption, financial mismanagement, and an authoritarian leadership style that earned her the nickname Dalton Dictator. Her rise to power was initially marked by grand promises of reform, economic revitalization, and a fresh start for the struggling village. However, those promises quickly unraveled, exposing an administration plagued by scandal, excessive spending, and a growing list of disillusioned former allies. Henyard made her presence felt both within Dalton and beyond, first by assuming the role of supervisor for Thornton Township, securing a combined salary of nearly $300,000 annually. This staggering income, particularly in a town where many residents struggle financially, left the community bewildered and frustrated. Accusations of unethical behavior surfaced almost immediately, and it didn't take long for Dalton's financial health to spiral into disarray. What began as whispers of mismanagement quickly escalated into full-blown investigations, forcing many former supporters to abandon her as they realized the extent of her misconduct. The situation took a drastic turn when reports of financial improprieties emerged, exposing Henyard's reckless use of taxpayer money for personal luxury. It wasn't just a few expensive dinners. Her credit card statements revealed an astonishing spree of first-class flights, five-star hotels, and extravagant dining experiences that far exceeded what any reasonable public official could justify. Within just 5 months, over $100,000 in taxpayer funds had been spent on lavish personal indulgences, raising serious concerns among residents and officials alike. The figures were staggering. Reports indicated that Henyard and her associates allegedly spent nearly $999,000 at the Four Seasons Hotel in Atlanta, followed by a lavish $133,000 splurge at the Marriott Marquis in Times Square. These eye-watering expenses, combined with other questionable financial dealings, painted a clear picture of an administration more focused on personal indulgence than the welfare of the community. As concerned trustees and residents raised questions about the town's dwindling funds, Henyard's response was anything but transparent. Rather than addressing concerns, she resorted to silencing critics, retaliating against those who dared to challenge her, and fostering an environment of fear and intimidation. Employees who questioned her decisions faced abrupt terminations, while trustees who attempted to hold her accountable encountered resistance, manipulation, and public dismissal. As the scandal surrounding Henyard's extravagant spending became increasingly difficult to ignore, public trust in her leadership rapidly disintegrated. More residents became aware of the financial mismanagement, and calls for accountability grew louder, forcing even some of her closest allies to distance themselves from her. The shift in support became undeniable when former confidants began speaking out against her actions, exposing the extent of her misconduct. One of the most notable betrayals came from Carmen Carlisle, a Thornton Township trustee who had once been one of Henyard's most loyal supporters. Carlisle, who previously served as Henyard's assistant before becoming a trustee in 2023, publicly denounced her former ally, accusing Henyard of engaging in unethical and predatory behavior for years. She alleged that Henyard had strategically manipulated residents, employees, and vendors to consolidate power while maintaining a carefully curated illusion of success. Carlisle's public condemnation sent shockwaves through the political landscape, further solidifying the growing opposition against Henyard. As Henyard's leadership facade continued to crumble, more individuals who had previously remained silent stepped forward, recounting their experiences of intimidation, financial mismanagement, and retaliation. The legal troubles surrounding Henyard only intensified as multiple lawsuits were filed by former employees alleging wrongful termination and retaliation for speaking out against her administration. Additionally, reports suggested that federal authorities had begun investigating allegations of public corruption and financial fraud, raising the stakes even higher for the embattled mayor. With mounting pressure from both legal entities and public scrutiny, Tiffany Henyard's once unshakable grip on power appears to be slipping, and the walls are closing in. The town of Dalton, once hopeful for change under her leadership, now finds itself embroiled in political chaos and financial uncertainty. Residents who once believed in her promises of reform now feel betrayed, left to deal with the aftermath of her reckless governance. To some, Henyard's leadership had been marred by scandal after scandal, but recent revelations from her former ally, Carmen Carlisle, sent shockwaves through Dalton and Thornton Township, further deepening the crisis surrounding her administration. Carlisle, once a trusted confidant of Henyard, publicly admitted during a special board meeting that she had initially believed in Henyard's leadership and had not questioned her extravagant spending. However, as time passed, the warning signs became too glaring to ignore. Under Henyard's reign, the township's finances, once stable and even prosperous, plunged into chaos. The village now faces a staggering deficit of over $365 million, a stark and shocking contrast to the $561 million surplus that existed just 2 years ago. This financial catastrophe has left Dalton burdened with enormous debt, forcing residents and trustees to grapple with the full extent of the fiscal mismanagement that has occurred. As the truth unraveled, Carlisle and other trustees took steps to introduce new spending restrictions in a desperate attempt to salvage what remained of the township's financial stability. However, by the time these measures were voted on, the damage had already been done.